Hi, welcome to Omashe Podcast. This is Calvin,
This is Kimberly.
and we are the co-founders of Omashe. Omashe is the business tool for all the entrepreneurs. And today we're welcoming Kara Golding. Kara Golding is the founder and CEO of Hint.
Hint water is an unsweetened fruit-infused water which Kara Golding built from her own kitchen to a 150 million beverage empire.
And recently, Kara Golding just published her new book, Undaunted. Let's hear her story.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I started Hint 15 years ago, and I did it as really a way to solve a problem for myself around sweeteners. So people think about sugar as really bad for you, but for me, I realized that diet sweeteners, so were just really not very healthy for me. And, it may seem obvious today to people that diet sweeteners are not really that great for them. But 15 years ago, I would share with people that I stopped drinking diet soda and my adult acne that I had developed cleared up, my energy levels changed, and I had gained a lot of weight over the course of many years. When I was in university, I was very fit and thin, and then all of a sudden over the years as I was working, I kept gaining weight, and I couldn't really figure out why that was happening to me. And so it was at this time when I was taking a break from work, and I was in tech. We'll get to that story in a minute. And I just did this little test. I had just started reading labels and counting calories and doing diets and different diets. And no one ever told me to watch what I was drinking, right? People said, exercise and watch what you eat. And I kept hearing that over and over again. And for me, when I saw the ingredients in the Diet Coke, that's when I thought, gosh, that just sounds very scary. I don't even know what I'm putting into my body. So just as a test, I decided to test it. And I remember about 2 days into this test where I stopped drinking Diet Coke, I was really thirsty. And I realized that I had been only drinking Diet Coke, and I just didn't drink water because water for me was boring.
Yeah.
And so that's when I decided one day I was in my kitchen and I saw a bunch of fruit on the counter, and I cut up some slices of fruit and I threw it in the water, and just for taste. And people would say to me, oh, that's such a great idea. And I was like, are they stupid? I mean, why are they all saying that it's like such a great idea? I'm just putting it in there just to get some taste.
Yeah.
But 2.5 weeks after doing this little test, my energy levels came back, my skin cleared up, and I lost 24 pounds in 2.5 weeks.
Really?
Right? I mean, it was crazy. And so then I basically lived this way for the next year. And when you lose that much weight, people would say to me, what did you do? What, and I would share with people that, I stopped drinking Diet Coke. And they said, no, I mean, diet? Why would diet cause that?
Yeah.
And it was really surprising to me. And more than anything, after about a year of living this way, I felt like I was educating people along the way, right? That everybody was very curious with me, that I was curious as to why this happened to me.
Yeah.
But I was also finding that people were very curious too. And they would say, well, you weren't drinking regular Coke. Why is it Diet Coke? Why do you think that happened to you?
Yeah.
And so it was then that I started going grocery shopping, and one day this gentleman was in the store who worked for the store, and he was putting the different beverages on the shelf.
Right.
And I just happened to say to him, do you have a water with fruit in it with no sweeteners in it? And he pointed to a product that I'm sure you're familiar with called vitamin water.
Yeah.
And vitamin water 15 years ago had more sugar in it than a can of Coke.
Oh,
And
wow.
so again, I felt that I was educating the gentleman in the store. I said, "Oh, that's really bad. I mean,
Yeah.
on a lot of levels." And he said, "Oh, I thought it was healthy because it says vitamin and water." And
Uh,
I said, "You know, that's really funny because I thought that my Coke was healthy because it said diet." And
mhm.
that's when I really started to think about the power of words and how I felt sorry for the consumer,
Yeah.
because here are the consumers that are just trying to get healthy and are willing to spend the money from
Mhm.
their paycheck to go and potentially stay healthy, get healthy, and yet
Yeah.
it's not so easy.
Mm.
And so while I should back up and share. So I had this idea for a product based on a problem that I
Mhm.
had. But prior to that, I worked for a company you may be familiar with called America Online. And
Yes.
so I was at America Online very early. I was there when it was about 100 employees,
Mhm.
and Google wasn't even started yet.
Mhm.
And I ran this department where it was the e-commerce and shopping department
Yeah.
that was that no one actually thought it was going to work.
Yeah.
And it was so early. It was in the early days. I have so many stories from that. But prior to that, I had moved from New York to Silicon Valley,
Mhm.
and I ended up working for a little startup that was doing CD-ROM shopping.
Yeah.
And sounds like so archaic, and it really was. But after about a year, we were acquired
Bye.
by America Online. But I
Mhm.
started my career um, I started my career in journalism. So I
Yes.
worked at Time Magazine, and then I worked at CNN
Mhm.
when Ted Turner, the founder of CNN, was still running around the hallways and yelling at everybody. And it was
Really
crazy.
excited.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so I've learned a lot. But I think more than anything, what I learned was doing what you love and doing what's important and doing what you believe has purpose is
Mm.
the most important feeling. But when had this somewhat crazy idea to go and start a beverage, everybody around me decided that I was a tech executive. And so it didn't make
Uh,
sense that I was going and starting a beverage. And
yeah.
for me, I just felt that there every day I would wake up and I would feel like there was this problem that needed to be solved in the beverage
Mhm.
industry. And so some days I would feel like I would step forward one step and then walk backwards two steps, right? It was just constantly, it was just this world, everything from the vocabulary, like just as an example, I'm holding up this little cap. I
Yeah.
thought it was called a cap. And in the beverage industry, it's called closures. And
Closures.
closures. And
Well,
so,
that's very
so if
different
you,
in the
so
future.
if you try to call a manufacturer,
Uh-huh.
at least in the US, and talk to them about caps, you give
So
away that you have no idea what you're talking about.
Mhm. Mm.
Right. And I thought, and again, I can see the fascination in both of you guys saying this, that I would just laugh because
Yeah.
I just thought I was learning in not the traditional sense of going back to university or business school. I just felt like every day there was something new that
Yeah.
I was learning, and it was very exciting. And more than anything, I thought if I could actually get people to enjoy water,
Mhm.
then, and this was a tool to
Yeah.
get them to do that. I
Mhm.
didn't plan on launching a beverage company. It was never my dream to be the next Coca-Cola
Yeah.
or, it just, I've met people who think about that, not me. It was never what I thought about doing.
Mm.
But when I found that I had this solve for health, for
Mhm.
myself and for so many other people, and that I could be in a position to actually help people,
Mm.
that was my purpose. And
Wow.
so every day I woke up and I would think about it, and uh yeah, I mean, it's a crazy thing, but
Yeah.
I will tell you that if you can ever be in a position and to actually lead a company, start a company, work for a company where you're actually helping people and
Yeah.
hearing that frequently, it's a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
And so that has really, I've been very fortunate to be able to do that.
It it's like really rewarding, but at the same time very scary, right? Especially for you, Car, because you're like changing an industry. That must be, as your book said, being undaunted. That must be a very daunting journey, right?
Well, it's interesting too, because I had worked for a startup. This
Yeah.
first startup when I moved to Silicon Valley was a spin out of Apple. And
Mm.
I had been following Steve Jobs for
Mhm.
when his early days. And I actually owned one of his original cute little, it wasn't so little, but Macintosh computers with the
Oh,
Apple
really?
on it. And
Oh.
when I was in college, and so when I moved to Silicon Valley, he
Mhm.
was the first person in my head, was somebody that like,
Very
oh,
Would like to
iconic.
work.
if I could
Yeah.
work for Steve Jobs, that
Yeah.
would be amazing. I never got there, but I found, just by doing some research, I found some people that had started a company that
Mhm.
had worked for Steve, and
Mhm.
there were 5 guys. And I was just very intrigued with, the number one thing I learned when I moved, when I took this, I ended up cold calling
Uh-huh.
the people, and I said, "Hi, I just moved here from New York,
Uh-huh.
and I'm very, very interested in coming to meet with you." I felt that there were two things that they could say: either come down and meet with me,
Mhm.
or they'd hang up the phone. And
Yeah.
so I've always said to people, what's the worst that can happen?
Mm.
They can-
Right?
Yeah.
Mm, mm, mm.
I mean, and I think what actually got me the meeting was, I'll never forget the gentleman who answered the phone. He said, "Well, what were you doing in New York?"
Yeah.
And I said, "I was working in journalism. I worked for CNN, and I worked for Time Before." I I don't even think he asked me what I did for CNN. I mean, and what was so, and something my father always said to me is that brands always have a place,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? And whether, I mean, how many people just hearing that you work for Google, it
Mm.
doesn't matter what you did at Google. It's
Yeah.
just the fact that you worked there, right? And for some it does, but for others it just matters. And so I had this fascination, probably from that point,
Mhm.
that got my foot in the door. But
Mm.
then the other thing that really I think about a lot was that there were the 5 guys, all different education levels,
Mhm.
and very, very different people and different roles. But the whole concept that ideas can come from anywhere,
Mm.
and that they were not inviting me to be a part of this company if I wasn't willing to participate. So
Oh.
participation was very, very critical. They wanted to hear how I thought about things. And it's very much a Silicon Valley thinking, right? Where
Yeah.
so many companies have taken that on, but you can't just sit there,
Yeah.
right? Eventually you'll be found out and you'll be asked to leave, because you have to be able to participate. And I think that that's the thing that was so different for me from working in New York, that I felt that a lot of your, at least your initial, and maybe even you got to stay at companies because where you went to college,
Yes.
who your parents were.
Hmm.
But in Silicon Valley, it was about, is this person able to add something? And if they're
Yeah.
not, right? Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a different mindset. And I think that having that, I still look at that time and
Mhm.
I think that, and it was the same way at America Online, even though that wasn't based in San Francisco.
Mhm.
But then when I ended up starting my own company, it's
Mhm.
the same thing,
Mm.
right? You end up, what I didn't realize back then, and I talk about in the book, is this idea of culture.
Yeah.
That I was learning all these different cultures and all these different ways of doing things.
Mm.
And I was also learning of the importance of making sure that I'm taken care of. And what
Mm.
I mean by that is that as you grow in your different roles, whether you become, a manager, a director, a vice president, a CEO of a company, the higher you go, the less, I won't say importance, but the less time you have and significance on learning,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're asked to manage, you're asked to mentor,
Uh-huh.
but you're not asked to
Very new thing.
learn,
Yeah.
right? And I think that oftentimes I have many friends who are C-suite executives where they tell me they're bored,
Mm.
and some are depressed, right? And I won't say that all mental health is really, can be defined in this way, but I do believe that people should take a closer look and really understand if you're learning every single day.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean going back to business school or taking a class on a online course. You could do that,
Mm-hmm.
but it also means making sure that you're doing something where you're learning. In my case, it was learning the beverage industry. And
Oh,
as
Yeah.
crazy as
Yeah.
that sounded, and I know you guys are doing a startup as well, I'm sure you're learning. And
Yeah.
it's hard, but
Yeah.
it's invigorating, right? And especially when you feel like something's so hard and then all of a sudden you learn, and
Mhm.
then you're like, oh, it's called a closure, right? And you're just, and your friends think you're crazy, right? Because they're like, wait, what? And you're just like, oh, I was trying to figure this out for so long. I got it now.
Oh, okay. So by having like a very open mindset to really like learn new things and ask people, it's kind of like a key thing
For a startup.
Yeah, for a
Definitely.
startup.
Yeah.
It is so key, but it's the curiosity, right?
Mhm.
It is leading with curiosity
Mm.
and making sure that, you're constantly participating, right? That doesn't mean you have to be the loudest person. That means that you think about what else will help you to understand. I was explaining this to somebody yesterday. It's kind of like if you look at your journey in life
Mhm.
as kind of gamifying, the
Yeah.
journey along the way, and you get to a certain point and maybe you start to feel, okay, now what? Right?
Yeah.
You're looking around and you're trying to figure it out. And then all of a sudden you get an opportunity. Maybe that opportunity means that you were let go,
Mhm.
or your company closed, or there were things that happened that maybe you could have controlled, maybe they were beyond your control. That should be your entry way to go and do to the next thing where you feel like you're going to have excitement and
Yeah.
energy and things that you really want to do. And you have to believe in the journey,
Mm.
and you have to believe that, the more, I mean, people ask me all the time, they say, you must not be afraid of risk.
Mhm.
And I've said that you don't actually think about risk when you lead with curiosity and learning.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-mm.
So from this book, I mean, I'm really amazed by this book because in the beginning, like when you move to New York after graduated, it almost feels a little bit like Devil Wears Prada for me, and I really
It
love
was.
it. Yeah, and then I really love it because it's very like storytelling, like, and it's in the great like time, like it's in the timeline is actually in order. So it's really easy to follow through like what you actually been through and what from like college to like your first job and second job, third job. And then and then from the book, you change a lot of industry. You change from like uh press industry to like CNN, and after that the e-commerce, and then after that it's the beverage industry. It's all very different, and like what we're doing right now is actually changing industry too. And then I think a lot of people like right now like just graduated from college, and they probably will facing the same thing, like changing career, changing industry, that what actually they learned before. So is there any suggestion for all these people, like they actually are facing the change right now?
Like young entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, I think well, here's what I'll say. I feel like we're in a time when I've talked to people who have been laid off from their jobs or graduating from school, and they think that they can't actually find a job because it's a very bad time. It's a pandemic. And I've said to people, forget about that for a minute. And I said, you need to figure out what you want to do, and then you go find it. And maybe you're going to need to talk to 2 times as more companies, or, you know, or do some more soul searching of what you really, really want to do. But you owe it to yourself to not put up a wall in front of yourself to say that because of a pandemic, because I've been laid off, or any of these things. First, you have to clear your mindset, and you have to know what you're really good at, right? You need to understand who you are and what you bring to the table. And one of the stories, as you talked about in the book, was when I moved to New York. And I think that the interesting thing for me was I grew up with 5 children in my family, 4 brothers and sisters. I was the youngest.
Right.
And I went to a state university. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. We didn't have the money to do that. And so I thought my education was just fine. And then when I moved to New York and I got a job as an executive assistant, it wasn't anything fancy, but it was in the Time and Life building, which was a very, very big deal.
Yeah.
There were many, many people trying to get jobs at very, you know, A-list kind of publications.
Right.
Yeah. I finally got the job, but a lot of the people that I worked with, because they had gone to better schools than what I had gone to, they got higher level jobs than me, right? They were an assistant manager versus being an executive assistant. And while I didn't love that, and I thought it was unfair, I thought that there was nothing I could do about it. Right? I couldn't go back to 4 more years of university. Instead, what I realized was that I couldn't and shouldn't think about it. Right? And instead, what I should do is do a really, really great job and do what I could to be helpful to people and grateful to people. And what was fascinating to me after 1 year of doing that at Time Magazine, I had executives coming to me and asking if I knew people for their roles because they loved my work ethic and they loved my attitude. And so through that year, I did work really hard. And what I realized is then at that point, they were referring me to people for, I didn't even have to do anything. And then somebody referred me to outside of the company to CNN, and they said, you should come and get her. And then and I think it's just a point where we all have these things where maybe they kind of bother us. We need to sit there and put them in a place where to figure out whether or not they matter, whether or not you can do anything about them right now. You will always find people who will doubt you. You will, especially when you're doubting yourself. But you can either allow that to bother you and not move forward, or you can accept that it kind of bothers you and just do a really great job and prove them wrong. And so I've always found that that is the better path. That, I mean, the number of people, I was explaining this today to an entrepreneur. I launched Hint with 4 children under the age of 6. And
that's really incredible.
And there were more people saying, okay, she's a tech executive. She knows nothing about business. I think I was called an arrogant tech executive, which I don't think I was ever arrogant, but they all had these opinions, right? And I mean, I listen to those things. I'm human, but there was nothing I could do about it. And so then I just kept moving forward. And then plus I'm a mom Look at this crazy lady. She's like 4 children. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to be able to have a babysitter, but they still said, she's crazy. She can't be an entrepreneur. She has 4 children. I mean, it was crazy. Today, those same people who doubted me, and some even doubted me to my face, investors, potential investors in Silicon Valley, they've now come back to me and said, you did it. And, you know, and I didn't think you could do it. And you know what I say? I know you didn't think I could do it. And so I just laugh about it. And so people will continue to watch. People I think what's interesting is people don't understand the power of their words. I think often when they doubt you and how that might really affect you. And I think so often I think about, I wrote a LinkedIn post about this, that if people actually who doubted you understood the power and how it stopped you from going out and trying and maybe doing what you were meant to do, then would they actually have said that? Right?
Yeah. Because
I mean, I think humanity is, I don't think they would most of the time. I don't think these people are saying it because they want to be mean. They either, it's your family who wants you to be safe.
Yes.
Right? And your friends.
Yeah.
We
And
resonate with that quite a lot. Like the family just like say like, maybe you should just go out and get a job. Maybe you should do this. But like,
or maybe like, hey, why don't you stay at this company? Isn't it very safe and great?
great.
Why do you want to start your own company? But people just want to do something with purpose, and that's very scary. That's very daunting. And this,
and this is and this is it. So even when I left tech and I told people I wanted to spend time with my children and my young kids, and I wanted to go to the mommy and me classes, and I wanted to do those things. I was jealous when I heard my friends who didn't work were going to do those things. And I said, oh, that sounds so fun. I wanted to really do it. And so I did it for 2 years. And the thing that so many people said to me when I took time off to be with my children, they said, isn't that risky? I mean, you'll never be able to get a job. And I said, well, if I did a good job and everybody wants to recruit me for technology, then won't I be able to still get a job? And then they'd say, well, just don't take too much time off. And I would say, how much time can I stay off? And can I take off? And they said, it was all different. It was 6 months. It was, 2 months. I mean, it was all different. And so what I realized is people don't really know, right? And they'll say stuff like that. And then the other thing, when I launched my company, then everybody thought that was risky because I'm going from one industry to another industry.
Yeah.
And especially family. They all thought it was crazy. Why is she doing that? And she was making good money, and she, and she was an executive and all this. But then when I explained to people that I was learning and that there was a chance that I was going to be successful, but there was also a chance, of course, that I would fail, I said, don't you think I can go back to technology?
Yes.
And I can tell people, if nothing else, at a dinner party, the craziest thing that you've ever done. Well, I went and started a beverage company. It'd be funny, right? People would, and they'd say, why'd you do that? I don't know. I have no idea. But it was just, I thought about it and I learned a lot. And I mean, I've interviewed so many people who have tried things and have gone off or even traveled. I know people that have traveled. I have a friend who just recently started a company. He left Facebook and decided to take 2 years off. Same thing. People were saying,
2 years?
Why are you doing that? And he went throughout the world. And now he's starting a company around food. because
Oh.
he learned about community and food in
Mm.
all different parts of the world.
Mm.
And so it gave him ideas,
Yeah.
right, to go and start something that he said he never thought about when he was
Oh.
at Facebook.
Mm.
And so anyway, my point is that people will say things they don't know, but they care most of the time, right? And that's why they say the things. But I think if you lead with curiosity and learning,
Uh-huh.
and and if you have some savings, I mean, and you're able to take a little bit of risk to go and do what you really want to do, that's the thing. Just getting yourself ready to be able to take those risks and save some things, and maybe not go to dinner as much, or not buy as many clothes or whatever it is. I mean, to many of us who want to start our own thing,
Yeah.
that is okay, right? You just want to go do something and see whether or not you can.
Mm.
Especially now these days, like internet, all the information is out there, and all the like younger people like Gen Z, they have all this information. Most of them really want to actually start their own thing. Either it's like from side hustles to like actually a startup. They actually do really want to start like their own business actually from one way or the other. So
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing, and part of the reason I wanted to write this book, though, and I've met many of those people as well who all want to be entrepreneurs. Being an entrepreneur is not, it's not either you're a unicorn or you're a failure, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of stuff in between. There's a lot of pivots, a lot of, you go, up and down and up and down, and you guys are doing it, right? And
Yeah.
I think there's some misinformation
Mm.
about what people think entrepreneurism is. There are way easier ways to make money,
Mm.
right? You can make so much more money, especially when you're starting out,
Yeah.
and less hours in a day working, all of these things. It's not easy, but it can be incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
And, and I think, again, if you have an idea and you're a problem solver, you have a way to solve a problem, that is really the key thing. And it's very rewarding, but it always takes longer than you ever thought it was going to take.
Spencer's journey is really interesting. I mean, can you believe it or not? We started from like a fashion label because I started in fashion to now an app, like the e-commerce app that we're building right now. It's totally different from like what we're trying to do before. So, but like all the dots all sort of kind of connect, and it leads to the end.
Totally.
That's really excited. And I don't know what's gonna be in the future, like what we're building right now is gonna be exactly the same thing what we're thinking right now, or maybe it's gonna change it. Maybe we're gonna pivot like maybe more than once, twice, or 3 times, or I don't know. It's all really gonna be really interesting how it's gonna turn out.
And you have to be able to look at business like that, because there are so many points along the way where you just have to pause and you have to see, what can we do?
Mm.
Right. And I talk about that question a lot. And we didn't have the perfect product. I always tell entrepreneurs, get your product out there, see what happens, because you will be surprised at what you find.
Yeah.
Even with the app, you'll see about navigation and trying to figure out exactly how people use it and think about it, which seems so, normal to you. But for us, it was lighting on the store shelves, or who we were replaced by. We weren't even thinking about that.
Yeah.
And they would have a huge effect on how we would be seen and how we would show up. And you don't get that information out of focus groups, right? You actually have to have the consumer come and see it and see exactly what they say about it. I mean, the number of times that, we have a relationship with consumers. Obviously, 50% of our business, for those of you who aren't that familiar with Hint, is direct to consumer.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's in the US, that is very unusual for a beverage company.
Very
And And we also sell in stores like Costco and Walmart and Whole Foods, but we also sell on our own direct to consumer site as well as Amazon. And so we have a relationship with the consumer and a lot of data. To your point about connecting the dots, I mean, all of my tech background and what I had been doing in tech, I didn't think when I was starting Hint that was what I was doing. I sort of thought that I was closing that chapter in tech.
Yeah.
But for me, I kept thinking about the problems that I had when I was fighting up against the big soda companies to get my product noticed on the shelf. And I thought, I should just launch my own store. And this was 7 years ago. And then maybe I'll shut it down eventually, but I might as well try. And so little did I know, I mean, this is at a time when everybody around me was saying, again, she's crazy. She's trying to sell beverages online. She's trying to bring technology into it. And I just kept doing it and kept listening to the customer. But I think that when you ask the customer the question, so often they're not really going to tell you the right answer, right? If you ask the customer, what flavors do you want? Right? They will tell you, oh, I want peanut butter water, or I want, so they'll never buy it. Right? I mean, they won't, they'll think of the weirdest and strangest things along the way. And versus our top flavors are the fruits that you buy in the grocery store that are the most popular. That's what people want. And so anyway, there's just so many things I've learned along the way that I'm sure you guys will in your startup too.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Thank you so much, Cara.
Yeah, absolutely. Come by and say hello to me on all social platforms. And I'm at, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn and Twitter and lots of others at Cara Golden with an I.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
Thanks. And everyone who haven't bought it or haven't read it, go and have a look. It is really amazing.
Yeah, we'll send you a link about it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Stay safe and well, everyone.
Okay.
And good luck with everything.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank
Cara.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.